Welcome back to Mo on the Mic. You may know him as the bassist of 5 Seconds of Summer or the guy who sings Order Chaos Order, but we know him as the creative inspiration and part of the reason why we have this job. That's right, it's Calum Hood Week. Hey,
I love Calum.
I know. I could go on about how this man has given me the career that I have. I could go on about how this man has no idea how much he changed everything. I think the reason why I have been crying listening to that album is number one, I feel very seen and on some of those
Mhm.
songs. Number two, when that email came in that I was going to interview him, that it not only did that interview really kick off the Groovy Moo because it was the first one where we had a whole pile of viewers, but also actually getting that email gave me a bit of hope because at the time I was probably not going to see 21 if I was going to be completely real. Um, but also, the actual interview itself was really interesting because I am New Zealand Maori and I interview a lot of Kiwis. But that was actually the first interview where someone willingly discussed their whānau and their heritage and was like genuinely proud of their culture. And it really shocked me because this is not someone who lives in New Zealand. This is an Australian man who actually not is not even really in Australia. He's sort of touring the world. Um, and he was still proud of that, you know? But yeah, his debut album, Order Chaos Order, that came out last year. This is one that visually I love because you it is so strong. There is no doubt in the mind what he is talking about. Um, in terms of favorite songs, I honestly have never actually been able to choose because no, actually I can't. Um, because all of them are so strong in terms of story, it really does depend on the day which one's going to hit you. Um, for a while, it was actually "Don't Forget You Love Me" was the one that was hitting. Um, now it's "I Wanted to Stay," and even "Sunsetter" seems to be one that hits quite a lot. But yeah, what one would you say if you can pick?
I can. But I'm gonna start on a negative to just get it out of the way.
Okay,
I think Don't Forget You Love Me, I think is a really weak opener and debut single. Unfortunately, I just think it's the pacing of his words in it. It's like too many words compared to the pacing of the beat of the music, if that makes sense. It's like
yeah,
he's trying to squish an extra word or two in a sentence where it doesn't quite. Anyways, that's my only negative on the album is that song. I can't listen to it. It just anyways, it's probably my ADHD and whatever.
get it though.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Um, but everything else is so much stronger. So genuinely like whatever. Everyone has critiques, everyone has favorites and least favorites. Don't come at me. I would say that my favorite I always I immediately go to All My Affection.
That is such a beautiful song.
That is so stunning. I just think the pacing of it, the slowness of it,
Yeah,
the like realness, like the rawness behind it, it is so vulnerable. It is so just sweet, but in like a really sad way. It
I
is
know.
heartbreaking. Um, but then there's also like that would be my favorite. If you ask me my favorite, it's that. But then like other like highlights for sure are Endless Ways and Streetwise because they're a little bit more like upbeat. I think that's quite fun. But also Three of Swords, I think the reflection in it
Yeah.
is really interesting. But also December 2023, a couple of years before the album was even in the ether, I got this as a tattoo because it is my favorite tarot card, and I think in the world of tarot, loosely, I'm not like a tarot reader or anything. So like I'm not coming from a fa place of like facts.
You don't have that on
Um,
your LinkedIn?
no,
Okay.
no, I'm not like the subject here. But I think it to me it means like mourning and the loss, but not loss in like it's gone forever. Loss as in it's gone because I have to change.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, goodbye, chapter's closed. It's dead and gone. It's more of a that's happened because this is going to happen. It's like an evolutionary type growth kind of death slash mourning. And I feel like where I've come from in my life, I'm not going to get into it, where I've come from in my life and where I'm going and where I am now, it's such a like drastic difference that like that's done.
Yeah.
That's over. That's buried. That's happened. But if that hadn't have happened, this wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
So I got this as a reminder to kind of sit with the loss, but try and put a positive spin on it and kind of apply it to where I want to be in the future and where I want to grow from. So yeah, then 2 years later, he releases an album and has a song called Three of Swords, all about reflecting on your life and stuff. That just felt very intrinsic. Is that the word? Intrinsic? I don't know. You
I'm gonna say
you know
yes.
what I mean?
I know what you mean, yeah. I don't know if that's the word, but I know the concept of what you're trying to say.
Yeah. I'm just gonna change the word. I'm just gonna think of another word.
Okay.
It just felt like poetic in a way because Callum's always been my favorite member. Callum has always been someone who's inspired me for the last 15 years,
Mm,
has been the reason I am here.
yeah.
So to have that on me and then as like a reminder to myself to then have him kind of do the same thing in his way, because I use tattoos to express myself. It's an art form that I just love. To have him then use his art form of singing and songwriting to kind of say a very similar message in his perspective. I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
get it. I see you, you see me. You don't know that you see me, but you see me.
Exactly. And I think also I talk about that interview really changing my perspective on some things. I went into that interview going, okay, well, if I already know that I don't really want to um make it to 21, um, I'm at least going to do this interview as like my final moment. So I had no intentions of changing my mind. But when he talked about that song, that was sort of the moment where I went, oh, like, no, okay, I'm making it to 21, I'm making it to 25, I'm making it as long as I can. Um, because yes, there's what you've said about like the Three of Swords. It is Three of Swords, right?
Mhm.
Yes, there's what you said about like the Three of Swords and like what that means in tarot, which I don't understand at all. It's never something I've explored. Um, but also how he talked about like the whānau and a lot of like tikanga Maori concepts within that song as well that I did understand. And to really like in the Maori culture, you do a lot of reflection on ancestors, heritage, where you came from and where you're going. Um, there's a lot of sayings, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was basically like, um, don't, the translation is basically like, don't turn towards the moon, turn towards the sun, something like that. And yeah, that song, because I sort of heard it the day that I also interviewed Callum, and it's always been one that I struggle to continue listening to because you can't help but sit and reflect and feel. But I always tell myself, you're not turning the album off before that song comes on. You're not skipping it
Mhm.
because you need to sit with that. And I think a lot of the songs on this album are like that, which is exactly why, who needs therapy when you can chuck an album on and cry your eyes out. um, yeah.
I do think it is a good album to just sit with. in all of its like realness. It's just, I don't know any other word than realness. It is just so vulnerable. It is just so raw. It is just so real. It's very emotional from a lot of different perspectives. And it's also quite a calm album in the sense of how it sounds. There's not like heavy drum beats or electric guitars or like a thick bass to it. It's quite almost acousticy, slow, mellow, relaxing. And when you're putting that sound with the words that he's saying, it almost like doubles down and makes it twice as emotional because you
Mm,
can put the words, that's emotional. You can take that sound, that's emotional. And then he's put the two together. And
yeah,
then you sit there and you feel like that scene in Twilight where Bella is just sat watching the months go by in her depressive pit. That is what the album feels like in the best way.
yeah. The way I explained it when I was trying to explain it first, this is before I even sat down with Callum, I had to explain the album as best I could to my team because I was like,
Mhm,
this is what I'm reviewing. And we like to talk about what each other are reviewing. And I said, honestly, it's a late night crying album full of authenticity, so much so that you can't help but actually reveal all of yourself too. And
mhm,
I love that. And I think we all need that. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
it
will
is.
say I've got my notes app with little notes of what he actually said to describe all of the songs because I cannot get it wrong. I've had
Well,
every
okay.
resource in the book. If I get it wrong, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I think genuinely everything past Don't Forget You Love Me, I think is such a highlight. And it's hard, like you said at the start, it's hard to kind of pinpoint a favorite. I have pinpointed a favorite, but each song is so different that
Mm,
like it's not like you're fighting between two or three songs that kind of sound the same and kind of had the same meaning that you're like, ooh, which one out of these teeny tiny differences is the one I prefer? No, they're all so different, and he's written them all from different perspectives or for different people or for different reasons or for his dog that has unfortunately passed.
mm,
But you can find yourself in every song. We've all
yeah.
had breakups, we've all had vulnerable moments with ourselves, we've all reflected on our lives, we've all lost people or lost pets. It's like it's all in there. It's all in that album, and there is something for every emotion in that album. If you want a happy song though, go to Streetwise. It's such a
No,
banger.
that one's
Such a
not happy.
Yes, it is. Well, it's not lyrically happy, but like it's upbeat, it's happy. All of the lyrics are sad. I was gonna say miserable, but I was like, that sounds too negative.
Actually, I'll give it to you. It depends on how you look on it because streetwise for me, and I understand a lot of people won't understand geographically what this means, but streetwise for me is very funny to listen to because I was born in Nine, I raised in Taita. Um, and the sort of the concept of like you look back on that time and it was some of the most fun, but you know it wasn't necessarily the healthiest time growing up around that area. And that song was quite a fun one because even just the beach, it just for some reason feels like the pace at which life went living there. Um, and so I give it to you. It feels very, I would say melancholic because it
Mhm.
is so emotional, but yet once the song ends, I can't help but feel, but wait, you survived all that. Like, gosh, that was hard, but look at you, you did it. And I think that is something that flows through all of the deepest songs in this album. That feeling of, gosh, what a wild ride, but you did it.
Yeah, I think for me, Streetwise is very like almost nostalgic in a very like warm, fuzzy way. It like reminds me of I haven't lived this life, but I've seen it in movies and it's like what I dreamed my life would have been like in this time, but it just wasn't because of everything.
Mm,
But it reminds me of like wanting to be a teenager who was having like these late night rides through town as the sun is setting and you're with your friends, you blast in all your music. It's you've got some like casual drinking going on, and it's that very like everyone's laughing, everyone's chatting, everyone's just openly themselves and with like no care in the world. You're not fully switched on to politics, you're not fully switched on to the happenings of everything that's going on worldwide. You're just in that little bubble in the warmth as the sun is setting with your closest friends who you love so dearly. And that's to me what that song feels like is that bubble of like happiness, even slight naivety, but still happiness.
That is so funny because what I'm actually insinuating is it reminds me of growing up around gang related areas. Nana and Chida are kind of like the ghetto of Lower Hutt. um, so that is hilarious. That's why I was saying, oh, I don't quite agree with you there. Um, but I appreciate how, as we've mentioned, the album in its entirety means different things to different people, and um, and I can appreciate that because that is also, I think, what you've just said is what my teenage self longed for is to be able to hang out with friends and you know sit down at the riverside and not have to worry about what friend you're not going to see next because they've become patched. Like that, what you've described there is all we ever wanted, rather than um, what that song makes me think about is starting year nine with a class of 30 and watching the group chat suddenly die because the people have joined gangs and you know, their story went the way it went. Um, and that's why that song for me is a celebration of the fact that I didn't fall victim to a lot of that, but also like it sort of feels like an I'm sorry to the people who did.
Mm.
Um, and I also think that the actual documentary that the song is based off um, also sort of describes that. So that's why I feel confident in placing those feelings with that song. But yeah.
Yeah, see, that's where you and I are very different because, like, I watched the documentary after the song had come out because otherwise I would never even known it existed. But
Yeah.
um, I found it somewhere online, probably pirated it because I'm from the UK. Hee hee. Um, but I like to form my emotions and stuff kind of as unbiased as possible.
Mm,
I feel like if I'd have done it the other way around and had like grown up in the areas that you grew up or in the areas that Callum grew up or watched the documentary before knowing the song, it would have like influenced me to view the song in a different way. Whereas now, because I already had those feelings about the song and then I watched the documentary, I'm like, they're too, I know they're related, but they're not related to me
mm.
because I consumed them at different times. I relate different feelings to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I can really understand like a lot of these songs for me have always been from the exact perspective that Callum wants them to be from because of the fact that the day I heard them and the day I interviewed Callum was the same day. So
Mhm.
there was no, the album wasn't out before I interviewed him. So there was no like chance to sort of sit with my own feelings towards the songs.
Mhm.
So I think had I listened to them for myself first, they would have had a different feeling than because I know like there are other people I've interviewed where I listen to their song and I'm like, okay, this is what it means for me. And then you interview them and you're like, oh, okay, that's completely not at all what they were thinking, but it's always going to feel this way to me.
Sunset Up,
Yep.
that's a fan favorite. I know
Yeah.
that's a fan favorite. That's like floating in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. Sunsetter is a very delicate song and it sort of talks about like how things can be taken away in an instant.
Mhm.
Um, I don't even really know how to talk about it. For me, just it's such a peaceful song, and yet
Mhm.
it's also not. Because the stress of the idea that everything can be taken away instantly is like such a heartbreaking concept, and yet you don't feel that. And yet you
Mhm.
kind of feel okay with just letting nature take its course. Um, and I think the visuals for that are also very peaceful, which adds to it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think he's managed to do that really well in the album is like he's harping on these really like intense emotional feelings that are like kind of not even just I don't know, they're just like dreadful feelings,
yeah,
but put them on such a like beautiful, peaceful soundtrack that like even though you're consuming and listening to the feelings, it's just like you're so chill about it.
yeah,
You're just like, yeah, it's happening, whatever.
yeah. And I think that's exactly why it does feel like a late night album. And I have used it on my late night crying playlist multiple times. Um, because it's the way I'd explain it is it's kind of like floating down a river and sort of starting to fall asleep a bit. And then every so often it's like, oh, there's an emotion. Let me just cry about it. And then you're like um back to that peaceful feeling. And I also think that the actual sound of it is something that allows you to sort of like if you've ever experienced like a creative therapy and they'll sort of like get you to a calm state so that you can bring the things up, like
Mhm.
so that you can bring these emotions up. That also it has the sound and it has the lyrics that really allows you to do that where it's like okay you're safe, you're calm, and because you're in a safe calm spot you can open up, you can release it. Yeah, I Wanted to Stay is very heartbreaking and beautiful, but I think what a lot of people miss when they listen to it is that it's actually switching between two perspectives. It is not just Callum wanting Duke to stay or Duke wanting Callum to stay. It switches between both, and it creates such a vivid picture that you can slip yourself into it far too easily. I know um, when I lost my cat, I could really slip myself into like, even now when I listen to the song, it's like, oh my goodness, like as a human, you want to protect that animal so much, but the animal also knows it's gonna pass. It knows it's in pain and it clings to you. Um, and I also know that he said that that song was actually the one that happened the quickest from the birth of the concept to the end of the song. Um, because he was like, well, honestly, like physically, him and Duke didn't write it together, but he's like in mentality and spirit, like those two were standing at the microphone side by side, and that emotions that it all just came out. Um, and so I think that song in particular, really deserves every little bit of love because that vulnerability is just so rare,
I
honestly.
do think it's really special as well because it's not a perspective that we hear a lot of in music. Very
Mm,
rarely do we have artists singing and writing about the loss of a pet. It's almost always the loss of a person in a relationship or a death or some kind of breakdown of something. Very rarely is it a pet, which is like some people I know seem think it's silly and they're like, oh, it's just a pet. It's just this, it's just that, it's just this animal. When no, like they've been in your life for their whole life. My cat is still kicking, touch wood. She's 15. So every day is like, oh. So like I know that when she goes, I will be distraught. absolutely distraught. But like I've lost pets in the past. I know that Duke was with Callum for quite some time, and I know that even the process of getting Duke, like from a shelter and stuff, kind of adds that complexity to the emotion as well. Like you didn't just get it from a breeder as a pup, lived its whole life with you. It the dog has gone through something. You've nurtured it, you've healed it, you've loved it so much that it felt that love and that trust and that warmth with you as a person. And now to honor the life you had with it and his life and the life you had together in a song as beautiful as I wanted to stay.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
stunning.
exactly. Um, a lot of people don't understand that, but it is so beautiful. Um, the fact that you really can feel the personality as well. A lot of people don't see that these animals have personalities, that they have their own story. And so yeah, it's just so beautiful to really explore that fully. Yeah.
But yeah, I think Callum generally as an artist in Five Sauce and in his solo projects, I think there's just he's always been quite reserved more so than the other members, which for me has always intrigued me, has always kind of drawn me to him and been like, oh, I wonder what he's up to. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder what he's thinking about. Because he's not as vocal, he's not as loud, he's not as forward and kind of front facing as the other members in Five Sauce. So when he released his album and was able to have a project that was just him, I was like, yes,
Yeah.
because I've always like yes, obviously Five Star songs are credited with who writes which songs, but you can't see a line and go, that's definitely this person's writing. So to
Mm.
have an entire album where it is the way Callum writes and how he feels and just his process, his creative process, to be able to pull it out of Five Sauce and have it as a standalone thing, I think is really special because like I said, it's always intrigued me how he is so much more reserved and quiet than the others. But that's not necessarily the same for in-person interactions. He can talk your ear off if you let him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I It blows my mind. Like, granted, he isn't like it with everyone. He's generally still quite quiet. But there was one time, I think it was in 2018, I gave him a Maori necklace that I did a lot of studying for because
I'm just gonna go like this.
I knew he had a couple growing up, and I knew at some point in his life he lost one or broken one or something. So I was like, oh, I'll get him an authentic one from a Maori seller, and it was made from fish bone and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it was like I did a lot to make sure it was the real deal and it wasn't some horrible fake thing. And I passed it to him, and the way he just opened up and he was like, oh, this is so sweet. Like, do you know what it means? And I then embarrassed myself. I did know what it meant, but I didn't want to like tell him in case I got it wrong. So
Yeah.
when he was like, do you know what it means? And I was like, yeah. And then I had to say it. I think he was impressed. I put that in quotes because I mean, he didn't say I was wrong, so fine. But I think he appreciated that I'd gone into the effort of doing something and kind of like researching his culture and kind of bringing that home to him. And he'd told me all about his mum and his sister and
Uh-huh.
how they all had these matching necklaces and how he lost his when he was this however old and how he's always wanted a new one and blah blah blah. And he went on for like 3 or 4 minutes just talking about his life back home and his family and his like Maori upbringing. And I just thought it was so sweet because very rarely is he that talkative.
Yeah.
I was just there, like completely in awe, like heart eyes, just like, wow, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And I think also that would have meant a lot to him because if it was a design anything like this, I don't know what design you gave him, but the meanings behind them, I believe if I've got it,
Because
yep,
I kept my one.
yep. So the meaning for that, especially because when you buy jade stone, traditionally you don't buy it for yourself, you give it to someone. But the
Mm.
meaning of that one is actually connection. And
Mhm.
diving even deeper, the meaning of that one is actually supposed to be that you give a little piece of yourself to that person. Um, so
Oh, I know that.
the
That's why I
meaning,
was embarrassed to tell him.
but that would have really stuck with him because also if he lost a design that was similar to that which he was given from his sister would have been kicking his ass like you lost that and you don't love me and that is like I'm not saying that she seems like the type to do that, but big sisters are always well, I don't actually know who's older. I just said big sister and
He
I
is
went,
older,
she
yeah.
is older? Yeah,
Marley is older, yeah.
thought so. She just gives that energy. Big sisters kick their little brother's ass when they lose something so important, so connected to the family like that. Um, so it would have meant a lot to him, but also both him and his sister, I've found are very, very proud of their culture. And it was something that really struck me growing up because I grew up in a predominantly Maori area, but yet because I am very, very white, a lot of people immediately sort of cut, well, I wouldn't cut me off's not the right word, but they immediately sort of wrote me off is what I'm trying to say. They wrote me off as like, she isn't, she's not
Mhm.
Maori. And that's actually not true. I did grow up knowing exactly where my marae, I did know where my marae was. And I actually did spend, like, I'm one of the few that, like, my brother doesn't experience this now because we've moved to the South Island and he doesn't have a marae on his school. The school I went to had a marae. We would on it once a week. I felt really connected with that, even though I was in school always called the white girl. Um, I do have just a little bit of Maori blood. And to see someone who was in a predominantly white band who was very white appearing still like open up about his culture, it struck me as like, oh, I'm not going to be judged in every area I go to for being completely honest about my entire life.
Mhm.
It's actually something that only in recent years I started acknowledging more because I've watched his creative journey and been like, okay, like, you know, I want to also be authentic. Um,
And
yeah,
I do think it's really important for him, as a Maori, as a person of color in a white band, in a predominantly white music industry. Um, it is so important. I think that might have been what kind of stuck with him. And with that one interaction, we've had many since, a couple before me and Calum. I'm joking, I'm being dramatic when I say we're like this.
yeah,
I wish we were, but um, I think it would have stuck with him somewhat to because I know for a very long time he was fighting a lot of people because people were just purposefully getting his nationality wrong,
mm,
in a malicious way, and it wasn't very nice. I do think it probably meant something to him to have someone go, I see you. I I can appreciate that. I'm actively learning about your culture because I appreciate you as a human and I can appreciate the platform that you have and that you are in such a white area that it means it takes nothing from me to learn about that. And in doing so, I'm not only just learning about him, I'm learning about an entire culture.
yeah,
I'm learning about an entire country. I'm learning about a whole new language. I'm learning so many things. And it was just important to me to learn these things. And it is still important to me to have somewhat of a grasp on the Maori culture because he deserves to be seen, he deserves to be authentically him, and he deserves to be celebrated for that. And
yeah.
it's such a minor thing for me as a white person to do.
The thing that really struck me actually when I interviewed him is I said to him directly, like, so how much of your heritage and your upbringing influenced this album? I said, because I can feel it, but like, please, I don't want to assume, like, you tell me. And he was like, honestly, this entire press run, that's the first time I've been asked. He went, wow, you actually like gave me the space to answer that. And then he started talking about like his iwi and everything. Um, and again, that does really stick with me as a New Zealand Maori, but also like I've never encountered that same openness since in any interview. Like I think I've come close once. Um, and I've that's all actually influenced how I ask questions as well. Is like, um, I've always wanted to tell a person's full story, but how do I that moment where someone feels really seen and it's like, oh, I can talk about the entire process, every feeling around this creative project. Um, so he taught me a lot as well, just on everything. He even taught me about taco types I did not know existed. Um, because my opening question was like, "Hey, it's Tuesday. What's your favorite taco?" Um, yeah, I had to do a lot of googling after that. I'm sorry, Callum. I did not know what you were talking about. So
I hate tacos, so always just unbothered by it.
I was
He's like,
expecting him to just be like, "Oh, I like a chicken one or I like a fish one or whatever." No, no. Um,
never been a fan of that food. Tacos specifically. Mexican food, delicious. Tacos specifically, too messy.
yeah, I get that. I I said to Mum, I was like, because it was a Tuesday, I was like, just to annoy my brother because he hates like Taco Tuesday or like nachos on Friday. I was like, we're gonna do Taco Tuesday with whatever he says, and I was like, we can do chicken or fish or whatever he says, and he said something so specific. I went, I don't know how to do that. Um, but that's also something that like you've said like he is quite a quiet, reserved guy, and I think that's what made the authenticity of this album and of this press run so relatable and so intriguing is because like when people are really quiet, when they actually do have something to say, you pay attention because that's them really putting themselves out there, which is very rare. Um, I have an uncle actually that he's very, very quiet, even at family events, but like he'll just sit there and quietly sip away, eat away, like, but then he'll hit you with that one liner that is like so funny, it absolutely kills the table. Um, and that to me is what it's like. Sort of talking to Callum is like quiet, 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 boom, destroyed. Like whether that's boom, I've destroyed you with something to sit and think about, or I've destroyed you with like an absolutely like killer one-liner joke. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think the press run was interesting. I liked that he took it. I say worldwide very loosely, um, but he took it out of America because
yeah.
I know Michael did his events in America, Ashton did his events in America, Luke did a little world-ish tour, and Callum brought some stuff over to England, which was really nice for me
He did
as
actually even.
someone.
That's what really impressed me is he actually sat down with. Don't know if it was One News or if it was Seven Sharp or it was something like that, like one of the big TV shows in New Zealand. And that is when you go, okay, not only do you care, you're paying attention here. Very few artists, like a lot of artists will dump Australia and New Zealand together and they'll go on some sort of like Australian TV show or they'll do a bunch of Australian events and then they'll like just have it that like New Zealand can also stream it. But the fact that he actually took the time out to properly acknowledge New Zealand, I was like, okay, noted. You're in my good books. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, when he came over to Manchester, I think he did, and London, don't really care about Manchester. I live in London, so I cared about London. I very rarely have the brain capacity to follow what's going on elsewhere in the world when it comes to like events, like
yeah.
tours and concerts and stuff. Because I'm like, oh, it's local to me. I'll go to that one, and then just ignore the rest of the poster. So I think it might have been Manchester that he did a signing or something, and London. And I remember that day I was so anxious. I hadn't seen him. So yeah, so I think he did Manchester and I think he did London. And with London, I got really anxious in the morning. I remember turning to my best friend and being like, I don't know why I'm so anxious because it was also the same weekend that Joe Keery was performing his concert. So I just had a lot of stuff going on that weekend. Um, and I was like, I think I'm just like nervous to see Joe. And she was like, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I've seen Callum before, like, it's fine. I've not seen Joe before. So I think that's where the anxiety is coming from. She was like, no, girl, I hadn't eaten at this point. I'd had like two mouthfuls of something and was just like, I feel sick. And she was like, no, I think it's Callum. And I was like, I really don't think it is. And I was so stubborn. I was like, I'm telling you now, it's not Callum. Because at this point I hadn't seen him in a few years, but like I'd still seen him,
Hmm.
whatever. Like I hadn't met him in a few years, but I'd seen him live. I've met him before. It's nothing new. I'm not nervous about seeing him ever. Um, and then I get to the signing table and he stood there. And before I even fully get there, I've got a whole plan. I've got one of my little business cards and I've like written on the back of like the fact that I work with his sister quite a lot and I got invited to do press for Luke. So like here's all of my ins. If you need anything getting done, like if you need coverage, if you need portraits, if you need press, if you need a photographer, anything in London, here you go. I had this whole
Yeah.
plan. And I get to the table, I don't even open my mouth. And he goes, I remember you.
Oh, good.
Immediately, my plan's out the window. I don't know what to do now. I'm panicking.
Yeah.
because because like going back off of the he's really quiet and reserved and whatnot, like I also am so obviously I would love to be remembered by the people who I love, but realistically, since the last time I'd seen him, he would have seen thousands of faces. He would have done a few hundred shows, seen thousands of faces, not only in crowds, but he would have met thousands of people on the streets, in airports. His life would have been so busy that seeing me the last time for what, 10 seconds? Seeing me a couple of times before that for what, 10 seconds is nothing in the grand scheme of things. So the first words out of his mouth being, I remember you.
Hmm.
Now,
Exactly.
now what? Now what? I still gave him the business card and I still kind of managed to say what I needed to say. Um, but as soon as I was done and I like got away from him and I'd got out of the building and like the girls we'd met in the queue we'd all like exchanged videos and everything. As soon as I got out of the building, called my best friend and was like, "No, you were so right. I was so scared."
Yeah.
Like, you were right. I'm so sorry. I was so nervous to see Callum because as soon as I was out of the building, gone. I like it had all melted away. It was like so peaceful, but I didn't realize how much the anxiety was just fueled by that. And then he full government named me on my poster. He would ask your name. So he'd sign the poster first and then he'd ask your names like to who to address it to.
Yeah.
But he didn't ask my name. And then he argued with me about what my name was. He looked at my business card that says Toy Around Photography because that's my name and that's what I do. And he's looking at it and he's going, does that say Taya? And I'm like, no, it says Toya. He's like, that's an A. And I'm like, that's an O. It's my name. He's like, that definitely says Taya. And I'm like, it definitely doesn't. And then he writes on the post, he's like, Toya Ann. And I'm like, bruv. So then I make fun of him and I go, just know that whenever I call you Callum in the future, it's with two L's. And then I leave. And then I have to leave. Because how dare you? How dare you say my name is Taya? No. I know my name. Why are we arguing about this? We've got a tiny interaction right now. I don't want to be fighting with you.
That's been this week's episode of Mel and Mike. Have a groovy week.